Well, welcome attendees. Thank you so much for joining us in this panel presented by Folk Alliance International for Folk Unlocked. My name is Jared Rivers, and I'm the Membership and Technology Manager for FAI. Now, before we begin, let's just take a moment to acknowledge that we are joined today by folks from around the globe using technology that's not accessible to all. And we recognize the importance and complexity and difficulty of land acknowledgements in the context of online organizing, creating, and collaboration. We invite all of you to join in acknowledging our shared responsibility to use this time well, and for each of us to consider our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and active allyship. While we hope that you take time to share your thoughts and observations in the Folk Unlock chat box just to the side of this video. And the panel will be available for viewing for the remainder of the conference once it's aired at this scheduled time. I would love to welcome our moderator for this panel, Blair Clark. Blair, why don't you go ahead and take a second, introduce yourself to the people watching.
Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Blair Clark, and I am an artist manager of the independent artist Ron Pope. And I also run Brooklyn Basement Records, which is an independent label and marketing agency for other independent artists as well. And today we are going to be talking about making an impact at streaming. And this panel will explore how music is discovered on streaming platforms, the way artists and their teams strive to get their music heard. And we'll talk about, marketing strategies and playlisting and all of that good stuff. So let's go through the agenda. First up, getting on a playlist is not a strategy. Next up will be hiring help. And third will be social media and streaming. So let's get this out of the way. Getting on a playlist is not a marketing strategy. Generally, a red flag for me is when a brand new artist comes to me and asks if I can get them on a specific playlist, as it points to maybe a lack of understanding of the landscape as a whole. So what I'd like to do is briefly introduce the panelists. And when I do, I would love for you guys to briefly talk about how artists and their teams should think about playlisting and what some realistic goals are when releasing new music. So first up, Chissy Nkemere, who is coming to us from Concord and Women in Music.
Hi, thank you so much for the introduction, Blair. So as she said, I'm Chissy Nkemere, and I am Senior Director of Streaming Marketing at Concord, and I'm a co-chair of Diversity Inclusion at Women in Music. So I love this topic. Getting on a playlist is not a marketing strategy, and it's really important to talk about goal setting, which should be the pinnacle and the focus for an artist and their team when they're about to release the music. And briefly, getting on a playlist, it should be an addendum in addition to a really strong marketing strategy rather than the focus. So some realistic goals can be recognizing what an artist's current audience is, where that audience can grow to, where the audience or where the team would like the artist audience to grow to, and utilizing different marketing strategies, both digitally and physically, to try to achieve those goals. And getting on a playlist can help that, and marking which playlists might be able to help achieve those goals can be helpful, but whether you get on the playlist or whether you don't get on the playlist should not be an indicator of the success of a campaign, which is super important to note. It should really be in the hands of the team to create the campaign that they'd like to see for themselves.
Perfect. Next up, our panelist, Laura Ohls, coming to us from Spotify.
Hi, guys. Thank you, Blair. My name is Laura Ohls. I am the senior editor of Folk and AAA at Spotify, which essentially means I'm overseeing much of the curation around folk, Americana, bluegrass, and generally anything that kind of falls into the root space, as well as building a strategy around programming towards an adult alternative audience on our platform. As a curator and editor at Spotify, obviously this is something that we talk about a lot, not only amongst ourselves internally, but with our partners. As Chissy said, playlists are a part of your goal setting and are a great piece of an overall pie when it comes to building out a strategy. But ultimately, you need something much more comprehensive especially if you're a developing artist, when you're building out a release strategy. It can't be the main component. When we're talking to our partners, we're often talking about building out 6 to 12 month strategies. And I think this includes making sure that you've got your ducks in a row when it comes to what your brand is, the story you're trying to tell with any sort of project. What is your plan to connect with an audience outside of playlisting and outside of maybe just the DSP presence, but how are you utilizing all digital and off-platform marketing opportunities to tell your story and to connect with fans? The whole idea is let's have that all baked in and have somewhat of a foundation of a fan base baked in prior to your release, so that when you potentially release and hopefully you have the opportunity to get exposure maybe on a playlist, there's an opportunity to convert that fan from not just a passive listener within a playlist, which often our playlist users are more of a passive listener, to someone that's actually enticed to dive a little bit deeper, explore a little bit more about you as an artist, and then hopefully based on the work that you've done prior to that release, you've built that that opportunity to engage with them and connect with them in a meaningful way.
Great. And actually, before I introduce our last panelist, I did want to make a note. We are assuming everyone that is watching this panel right now has a baseline understanding of how streaming works, general best practices, free tools that all artists and teams can use. However, if you are newer to the streaming discussion, we do have some resources that will be posted for you guys. Okay, final panelist, Tayla Ridley, coming to us from Nettwerk.
Hi, Blair. Thanks for having me. I am the digital account and streaming director here at Nettwerk Music. And I think one of the most important things, just to kind of echo a lot of sentiments that have already been mentioned, that editorial playlists help artists brand themselves in the marketplace for new fans. An artist's main goal should be reaching their fan base and activating new listeners. But there's a lot of different laneways and activations on platform that an artist can employ when releasing music to gain followers and create a sustainable streaming career throughout their album campaign and from then on.
Great. So let's dig in a little bit more. So this first question will be probably aimed more towards Chissy and Tayla. For looking at the overarching strategy for releasing a single or an album, what lead time do you suggest for either of those two properties?
I can jump in here. Laura actually in her intro just mentioned a 6 to 12 month lead time, which is something that's ideal when it comes to a campaign. And then asking about, for a single or for an album is really important, because if you're thinking about the single is attached to an album, the release of the single is going to be the start of the album campaign. If the single is not attached to an album, we're just, putting a song out to see how it performs, to see what the audience reaction is. You're going to want to think of that single as an album in itself. But with regard to lead time, you want to get out as early as possible, because it's not going to be in most cases, it's not going to be possible for you to reach the fan bases you want to reach the different audiences you want to reach, to build a brand strategy and maybe retool the branding that you had on maybe a previous release in a short amount of time, to make sure that the audience who's listening to your single or your album when it ends up coming out is the audience you want to make sure is listening to it. And at the end of the day, you want the most amount of people and the most diverse set of people to be listening to your music, and having enough time to set that up internally for the artists with their team, manager, label if they have one, and of course the DSPs is super important. It takes time to build a story, not just internally and not just with partners that you're working with, but it also takes time to build a story with the fan bases that you're trying to reach. The audience is going to connect with you, but you have to give them time to do that, because not everyone is paying attention right when you want them to pay attention. So as Laura mentioned, it's ideal 6 to 12 months. I think a lot of us working in the industry know that that's not often the lead time that we're given with releases, but we try to do our best with what we're working with. The longer, the better, to be totally honest.
Yeah, I completely agree, Chissy. I think that, to give some hard numbers, like for a single, we're looking at 4 to 6 weeks to properly set up a release. That's allowing time for the artist's music to be delivered, ingested, pitched, time for assets to be created, and then ultimately the social campaigns rolling out so that the fans are activated and ready to go and engage with the music once it's released. And then to talk about albums, it's not unheard of at Nettwerk to be working like an 18th month release campaign for an artist. Once an album's come out, that's not the end of an album cycle for us. And we always look for ways to capitalize on top of that momentum, whether editorial playlists come in or not, like algorithmically, and the boost that we're seeing with followers on platform. How are we using that momentum to use those fans towards new music and alternate versions of songs? So just keep that momentum rolling for as long as possible.
Yes, that is one thing that I always say, is to have alternate versions, use the studio time to get some extra stuff. Laura, do you have anything to add to that, or just want to share some of the ways that Spotify is structured to support artists and labels in this way?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if we're talking broadly about what's available for any artist in order to best take advantage of Spotify as a platform and set themselves up for success, I think we have to talk about our Spotify for Artists dashboard. It is the one-stop shop for any artist, no matter what size they are, to best understand who their audience is and how they can extend their brand on our platform and take advantage of all of the tools and resources that we provide to any given artist. Spotify for Artists, it's just artist.spotify.com, and it consists of multiple things. It's a dashboard where you can dig into your audience and how they're consuming on our platform, what they look like, where they're streaming from. Is it from your artist page? Is it from playlist? What playlist you've been added to? You can dig into all that information, and it's updated in real time. But in addition to that robust dashboard, it's also the tool available to you to submit new music. So in advance of you releasing new content to Spotify, you have the opportunity to use our new music submissions tool to submit your track, a focus track, to us, the editors, for review. And it allows you to add a number of different descriptors, whether it's genre, whether it's based on the mood of the song, and then we also allow for you as the artist to give us a little bit more detail about who you are as the artist, what the message of the song is, the intention of the song, and then some details too, going back to the playlist is not the strategy. Give us some details about what your overall release strategy is going to be, what other activities happening off platform. We want to see as much context as possible, because it best helps us understand where you are and what you need in terms of support and what your plans are. So highlighting, emphasizing that this tool is so important. And again, I think there's this assumption that getting in contact with an editor and having a relationship with an editor is the be-all, end-all. But there are hundreds of us across the globe, and you may make assumptions about what we edit and what we program. But the fact of the matter is, we're all editing local playlists, we're editing a global playlist, and the best and most efficient way for you to get your songs in front of us, the editors, is to use this tool. __.
Yes.
In addition to that tool as well, we've got a number of how-to videos from artists about the best advice they've ever received. We've got tutorials from us, the employees, in terms of like best practices, how to use some of the tools that are available to you on the platform. It's just the list of resources available on that website are endless.
Great. I think that's super helpful. Let's go ahead and move on to our next topic, which is hiring help. As streaming has become more critical distribution channel for music, companies have kind of popped up everywhere, offering promotion services to artists, labels, and managers. Some are doing great work, and some are employing tactics that could be detrimental to an artist's career. So this is probably a question for Chissy and Tayla first. When artists are looking to hire help to assist in streaming, what are some questions that they should ask them, and what are some red flags that they should look for?
Yeah, I mean, if an artist wants to take that path to get some help, some added promotion, especially in the streaming space, I'd highly recommend that the artists do their research and know what they want to get out of it. Does the company you're considering have experience in the genre of your music? What sort of information does the company intend on sharing with you? And will it be clear what they're responsible for accomplishing? And with those streams, has the company shown you any reports of previous campaigns? A lot of companies list their clients out on their websites. So, if you know any of those clients or artists listed, you should definitely reach out for feedback and see what there is to gain from working with them.
Yeah, everything that Tayla just said is right on point. And I think it's really important to emphasize that hiring help is really necessary sometimes. I think because in 2021 and with technology, we've kind of gotten used to, I can do everything myself. And some people can, depending on what they're doing, but hiring help is really helpful because not every one of us is an expert in everything. So that's the first thing. Second, doing research is pinnacle. Tayla covered, when you're talking to a company, what you should ask for, but also even before you get to the point of speaking with a company, what do you need help with? Writing down, this is what I got, this is what I know, this is what I believe I'm an expert in, versus this is what I'm trying to build to, this is what I don't know, is really, really important to figuring out what types of companies you reach out to in the first place, or what types of conversations you're entertaining based on which companies are reaching out to you. And in addition to that, there are so many ads online. There's so much you can find on Google about streaming, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. I can't tell you how many times I read an article, whether it's on a music site or a blog that just has slightly incorrect information that takes what could be a simple conversation or a simple topic about streaming, but misrepresents it to the reading audience. And it's really important to be able to parse what is real and what is not. And in that case, on social media especially, there's a lot of ads from companies that either guarantee playlisting or guarantee placement across the DSPs. And you have to be wary about that because no matter what, you can't guarantee anything in this game, no matter who you know. Laura just mentioned the misconception of if you know the right editor, it's more important than the Spotify artist tool. And I've been at a label for 8 years now. I will tell you that we all use a Spotify artist tool, no matter who we know. Laura and I have been working together for 6-7 years now. My connection with Laura, love you, girl, but Spotify artist tool is really, really helpful. So if you see something, an ad on Instagram or Facebook or on Google that's saying, I can get you on X amount of playlists, big, big, big red flag. And if they're telling you, I can take your streams from this to this without any proof in what Tayla was saying, you want to see what kind of campaigns they've worked on before. They say, based on these campaigns that we've run, typically our business can help grow you, on average 5% or 10%. Sure, you can look into those campaigns, but if they're saying, you're going to get XYZ, it's a big red flag and you should run the other direction.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I have recently gotten a bunch of ads for some reason on Instagram, and it's absurd. They're saying that they can guarantee 100,000 streams or something like that. And it's crazy, but I do feel for some of these artists that really can't tell the difference between what's real and what's not. Laura, maybe you can talk to this a little bit. If an artist feels like they have inadvertently gotten, hired a company that is doing something wrong, how can they tell, from their end, what is a bot play, what's going on?
I think I'm going to reiterate and reemphasize what's already been said, which is it's great to explore help. There are some wonderful third-party services that actually do a great job of helping you to promote your music. But if they are guaranteeing a specific number of streams in exchange for money, or they are guaranteeing specific Spotify placements on Spotify owned and operated, edited playlists, that is the biggest red flag. First and foremost, it violates our terms and services if they're asking for money in exchange for a certain number of streams. And you can almost assume if it's in exchange for specific number of streams, that it's very, very likely that that is a bot-driven campaign, and that those potentially fraudulent streams will be identified by our fraud team.
Great. So stay away, guys. I want to flip this question a little bit in terms of when Tayla and Chissy, I know you both work for labels, so I'm curious, when you're looking at an artist, what are some elements that you look for in terms of data and engagement numbers that might indicate that this artist could have a good impact at streaming?
Yeah, so I think follower growth is a major, major metric for us. Can't emphasize that enough. Follower growth is so important, both on and off streaming platforms. Ideally both, but also a great mixture of streams, organic and algorithmic streams on the upward trend indicate that there's something bubbling up, and at Nettwerk we really want to capitalize that and help drive it to make an impact at streaming.
Yeah, there's two things that I mostly look at when I'm looking at data and the potential for an artist to grow. It's not necessarily the raw number of streams. I work with a lot of developing artists, so I'm not looking at, do you have 5 million streams? What I'm looking at is where are those streams coming from? So source of stream and the impact of the stream. So if working with Laura, if you're looking at Spotify for artists, you can see the source of stream. Is it coming from the artist profile, listeners saved music, Spotify editorial playlists, other people's playlists, Spotify algorithmic playlists? In a very, very general sense, this is an overgeneralization, but if the majority of streams are coming from an artist profile and listeners saved music, it's an active stream. That means that fans are typing in, I want to listen to so-and-so, they're saving the song to their libraries, and they're streaming it over and over again. Versus Spotify editorial and algorithmic playlists tend to be less passive. Not all of those are passive streams, but some of them are, a good chunk. So what really raises its hand to me is not only are fans searching for the artists and saving it in their libraries and streaming on their own, but incrementally our monthly listeners increasing. Followers are super important to see what the impact is, but really at the end of the day, there are a lot of people that listen to artists that don't follow them on platforms. So, seeing how monthly listeners are growing, if it's incremental growth, if we only see growth when a song has been added to a playlist, or, after a song has been added to a playlist, or after a campaign has kicked off a couple of months later, are you still seeing that growth? Are people still streaming that artist? It's really important to look at because it can show if there is a connection between the artist and a fan base, and if there will be a connection between the artist and a potential fan base in the future.
That's great.
I'll say, even if you don't mind me jumping in, even on the editorial side, we're looking at those sources of stream, and we're looking at audience growth over time for specific artists that we're programming, just to see how potentially our playlisting might have an effect on their growth. And I think this kind of is like a red flag across the board, not for us as editors, but just in general, is if you're looking at say you're an artist and you got a playlist placement and you're seeing just a massive spike from one playlist placement, I think that's certainly an indication that potentially the work hasn't been done to build that foundation and set up an audience that can compound over time and grow exponentially. But if you're seeing that you got a playlist placement and it's a like steady stair-stepping rise over time, I think that's kind of the kind of growth that you're looking at. Not like these big spikes in consumption in one bucket or another, whether it's from your artist page or whether it's from editorial playlists. You kind of want to see a balance in terms of where streams are coming from and what type of consumption it is.
Yeah. And I will say on that note, obviously getting added to an editorial playlist is amazing and super helpful, but if you haven't done any other work around it, the minute you get taken off, then everything goes away. So it makes sense to build everything up and pay attention to everything. All right, I think it's time to go ahead and move on to topic number 3, which is social media and streaming and how they are intertwined. A lot of artists and labels tend to think of streaming in a vacuum, but it is really not. All elements of an artist's career are intertwined, and it seems, at least partially, an artist's success at streaming is connected to a healthy social media presence, and they really kind of act similarly, social media and streaming, and how you're engaged with it and what you get back. And so I'd love to talk about this. And again, I feel like I'm starting always with Chissy and Tayla, but how can labels and teams utilize social media to drive new listeners to streaming and vice versa?
I can jump in. I don't want to hop on anybody, but yeah, streaming is very holistic, and you hit the nail on the head when you said that there's often the misconception that streaming lives in a vacuum, or I guess it's less a misconception and more an assumption that streaming lives in a vacuum. And one of the biggest challenges in working in the streaming side of the music business, especially for a label where, at least where I work, I'm the liaison between the artist and the manager and the label itself and the DSPs. One of the biggest challenges is this idea of getting streams. I cannot force anyone's hand to click stream on a playlist in the same way that I cannot force anyone's hand to add a song to a playlist. But what I can do is help create a strategy and help create a plan to create, as Laura mentioned, a foundation and do the work so that we can see the increases in active streams and we can see the want of a fan base to engage with an artist and have interaction on and off platform. And that can mean, creating a solid visual strategy. What are people seeing online that makes them want to say, or on TV, that makes them want to say, I want to listen to this song. I forgot about so-and-so artist, and let me go stream them. Let me go type their name in and see that they have a new album coming out or a new song that just came out, and let me stream that and add that to my library. This all exists off platform, and the digital marketing aspect of it, digital marketing, not because it's marketing specifically for streaming, but digital marketing because it exists on digital platforms, can really help create a holistic viewpoint of the streaming strategy that will benefit a campaign. And I say that to say it can also be marketing that exists on a digital platform that markets a physical product. That could be a live show, that could be a vinyl piece or a box set, that could be, a merch line. It is really important to not diminish the impact that physical has on streaming and how the entire music industry works together. It is a literal economy. And while I, as a streaming person, can take the information that is created by the artist and the manager and the label and then give it to the DSP, make sure that they're as informed on the project and campaign as possible to make the decisions that they want to make when it comes to on-platform placements, off-platform placements, playlist placements, and so on and so forth. I cannot create something out of nothing in that I cannot increase streams without there being a solid off-platform strategy that will drive the consumer to want to interact with the artist and with the campaign.
Yeah, that's perfect. Tayla, do you have anything to add?
It's a tough one to follow, but I'll try. No, I think Chissy made a lot of great points there. And just to be a little bit more specific, I think a great tool of social media is being able to understand your demo really well and how that translates onto streaming platforms, and especially with specific territories. Maybe you're able to lean in a little bit more on social media with territories that are really bubbling up for you as an artist, and how that can translate into streaming in certain territories, and then hopefully onto bigger playlists or momentum on digital platforms.
Nice. And Laura, I did want to ask a little bit about this. So now everybody has access to Canvas. So everybody can add a visual component to their music. Sure. Are there any best practices that you can share that might be helpful to tie in social media with Canvas and Spotify in general?
Yeah, I think it might be helpful too to just introduce what Canvas is, since we have been in beta testing for so long of this feature. So Canvas is essentially a 3 to 8 second long looping visual that you can attach to your individual songs and your catalog to show, essentially just to add a creative component to your music. And there's a number of different ways in which artists have been very, very smart in which they use this particular feature. I go back to this all the time, but Billie Eilish with her album, she used the Canvas feature and created these 3 to 8 second loops using fan art. And so she actually commissioned art from her fans to be tied to this feature on our platform, and really made for a unique, engaging experience for her fans and for people that are discovering her. But like I said, this tool has been in testing for a while. It's now available for all artists to use. The functionality is really ideal for launching new songs, to tell a little bit about the song and the visual direction you might be going with the project. But we often encourage too, like as you're releasing more content into the market around a project, you might want to consider updating your Canvas artwork. Maybe there's a new music video that's launched after the initial launch of a song or an album, and perhaps you want to show and extend the music video visuals into the Canvas feature. Maybe there are live clips that you want to potentially use in the Canvas feature. Those are all things to consider. You don't have to stick with the same visual for a song for forever. It should be something that's evergreen and always on. It's also important to emphasize why we've gone wide with this feature. It's because it works. Adding this like high quality visual has increased our track shares of a potential canvas by 200%. And by track shares, I mean within Spotify, you're actually able to share the song and the canvas itself that's tied to it to Instagram stories, and it'll play in a loop much like it does within the Spotify app. So it's a great way to extend the visual and really maximize the reach of a potential song. That way, you're driving back to the platform for hopefully people to stream it. In terms of best practices, again, I mentioned consider updating regularly. Don't have to stick with the same visual. Exclude song titles and artist name. Those automatically get added to the visual based on the metadata. So it would clash if you have both in there. Consider not having those. Maybe avoid footage in which there's talking or singing, because it might not match what's actually happening in the song and the audio. Those are, again, I think there's just a number of different things to consider, but I think it's all about making sure that you're leveraging this tool to really tell your story and get creative and extend your brand on our platform.
Yeah, I love it. I think it looks so great when it's shared to Instagram stories.
I actually wanted to add one more thing that I think is important in this discussion when we're talking about social media and streaming and also playlisting. We touched on playlisting before, and we mostly were talking about Spotify editorial playlisting, but I also don't want to diminish the impact that creating playlists as an artist can tie and how that can tie to social media marketing for a particular campaign. Something that I always encourage my artists to do is to create their own playlists where they're getting unique. You can create a theme. You can do something pretty typical, like, this is what influenced my upcoming album, and, have your song at the top and the song that influenced it, or the few songs that influenced it right below it. Or you could do something crazy and come up with like a long, fun playlist title that gets people talking. And it's important because you can kind of take the story into your own hands rather than saying, oh, I didn't get an ad to rock this, everything is ruined. You can say, it doesn't really matter what's going on the editorial side. That's not my main focus. I hope to get on this playlist one day, but my main focus is making sure that my fans, both current and potential, are able to engage with me and see where I'm coming from, see where my story comes from. When it comes to playlisting and where it comes to the piece of art that I've created. You can pin it to the top of your Spotify. I know we're talking about Spotify a lot, but Spotify is often the topic of discussion because they create opportunity and they create resources that artists can use to really tell their story in a very simple and direct way. And so you can pin your playlist to the top of your artist page. You can, share it on social media, drive it back to platform, and you can really, encourage people to listen to more of your catalog. If, for example, you're leading into an album campaign and you have 1 or 2 songs out right now, but you want to encourage listening and remind people that you're there because more music is coming out, throw in a playlist that has your catalog in it. It's going to increase your streams, it's going to increase your monthly listeners, it's going to increase your active streaming, and it's going to increase the shares on and off platform. And it really, again, that economy of streaming goes from on platform to off platform to on platform. And I just don't want to diminish what playlisting can do and how it can really tie into an entire campaign, and how you can, you as an artist can actually have a hold on your story as well. I had to just throw that in there.
No, it's good. And one thing that what we do when we first start working with an artist is we do, we call it a digital audit. And so we look at every platform, make sure that it looks cohesive, they have the same profile picture, make sure that they're following all best practices. We suggest that they make playlists if they need to.
Yep.
Kind of almost treat it like it's a social media platform in and of itself,
Mm-hmm.
so that when somebody hears a song and they're like, oh, I like this artist, or I think I do, let me go check them out on social media, it all ties together and it feels active and engaged, and so it just it's all very cohesive.
Exactly.
Another great
aspect. Checks.
Another great aspect is tying it back to other artists you want to align yourself to. Community is such a big aspect, especially at Spotify, growing your fan base and connecting you to artists all around the world that you want to align yourself. Making playlists is just a bigger branding tool, is getting on editorial playlists at Spotify. So if there's artists that you want to hopefully one day collaborate with, or that you aspire to be like, tour with, all of those great things, adding those artists to your playlist that you're creating, you yourself are becoming a curator for your community. And that's a really great tool and a power that is given back to the artist. And that can just help grow you infinitely on the platform.
Laura, I feel like you're loving this.
I love it because I, as a user, not an editor, but as a user of Spotify, I admittedly spend a lot of time digging through artist-created playlists because I think it's really a really unique window into who the artist is and how they're influenced. And I think it Tayla, like you said, it shows their community, their intended or their actual ties to other artists on the platform. We often hear of like case studies in which artists have actually found that they've been playlisted in another artist's playlist and they've never maybe heard of that artist, but through that connection and over time, there are collaborations that often are fostered out of these connections made through the platform. So I love hearing that our partners feel that these tools are just as valuable as we see them.
Super valuable. I have a question about data and analytics, one of my favorite things, and how they can go together on both streaming and social media. So are there, for Chissy and Tayla, are there any streaming analytics that go hand in hand with social media analytics that you're looking at, like whether it's Instagram growth, does that follow the stream count? I feel like so many people get bogged down in the actual stream count number and that's it, and they don't realize how relevant everything is together. Are there any two things or multiple things that you pick out that really feel like they go hand in hand?
I mean, it goes to the conversation of like correlation versus causation, at least for me. It's not that I think anything goes hand in hand. Sorry, someone's at my door. It's not that I think any one or two things go hand in hand, but I think it's more of a, where does the audience lie and what does that tell us about the audience? So for example, if we see a high engagement rate on Instagram or versus, a slightly lower engagement rate on Facebook, what does that tell us about the audience, where they are, and what that might tell us about their consumption? Because at the end of the day, for me, even though I work in streaming, I don't care where an artist or where fans choose to consume their music, whether it's they're buying the music physically, they're streaming the music, they're buying it digitally. I just want the economy of streaming, the economy of the music industry to work hand in hand. And we know that people who go see an artist live, if they're interested, they're going to consume the music in any way that they want to consume the music. It's not up to me to dictate to someone they have to stream it on Apple or they have to stream it on Spotify. It's up to me to figure out where they are and give them what they're asking for. So I think data strategy-wise, it's more important to me to identify where the audience is and how best to service that audience where they are, and then find the connections, find the ties and the crossovers between the audience that we currently have versus the audience that we want, and to figure out how to get them. And a good example of that is, if we see an artist or a fan base is really highly active and, on a platform that has a slightly older audience, and then we see that it ties into how that audience might consume vinyl, for example. How can I tie in the vinyl audience to a streaming audience? How can I say, yes, but there's crossover, and here's how I'm going to pinpoint it, and here's how I'm going to push the ones that are on the edge to a digital audience and make that connection there. So it's for me more of a correlation rather than if. I just don't want to get into the if we get this audience here, if this data says this, then that means this on streaming, because very rarely is that an assumption that we can make.
That totally makes sense. One more thing I think I'd want to talk about is, I feel like in certain genres, especially maybe folk, Americana, there are some artists that feel averse to posting a lot on social media. They don't feel like it feels authentic or something. How could you encourage these sorts of artists that feel this way to posting in a way that feels organic, or just kind of get them over their fear and hump of they don't want to do social media?
Yeah, so sorry. So I think that it's really important for them to develop their own voice, and for us as a label to give them suggestions on, what could align them and open up their fan base to understanding where they're going with their music. But I think most importantly, just having a conversation with them before getting into a campaign and knowing what they're comfortable at and what you can work with them with, always meeting the artist at where they're at, and then, where they're at with the music and the mood and what they're excited about the campaign can really add to what the story they're telling online, and how as a label can we support them, with what assets can we create that'll make them confident in sharing their story on social media and get their fan base engaged and ready for the new music that's coming out.
Yes.
Exactly what Tayla said. And I think that the root of this often comes from two things. One, a lack of trust that it actually works and can transfer to making deeper connections with an audience. And number two, feeling like they're not being authentic. And the two ways that we combat both, on the lack of trust side, show them examples of where it has worked, how someone has shown their personality, and you see a spike in engagement, or you see comments that are really loving, or you see people having an emotional connection to what the artist is doing or saying. And then on the authentic side, showing how to be authentic. One, choosing one platform. Not everyone's going to be great at everything. Sometimes you have artists that love Twitter. Sometimes you have artists that love TikTok. Sometimes you have artists that love Instagram. Choose the one that you're best at and go forth and prosper. The rest, that's why you have a team. We'll help you out there. And then also just showing like how you can be authentic on platform. We have an artist named Rustin Kelly who I've worked with for a ton of years, and he is so funny, so authentically himself, so transparent, and his music is incredible. And very rarely do I see an artist that is so just shows up as themselves in every form, and the fan base just loves it and eats it up. And you can't fight that. You can't look at that and say it doesn't work, especially with an artist like Rustin Kelly. So seeing these examples is really helpful to, pushing that conversation forward with the artists that you have.
Yes, perfect. Okay, I think we have gone over everything for social media and streaming. I do have one more question we're going off book, everybody. So I wanted to, and this involves Laura, it involves everybody. I wanted to talk about alternative release strategies. So with the absence of touring, I feel like a lot of artists have started to get away from the traditional album cycle. Whether that's releasing music every month, dropping EPs after albums have come out, a la Taylor Swift, or just, any number of things. Laura, how do you feel like that can impact streaming? And is it helpful? Is it not helpful? Is there ever a case where it's too much? Anything goes.
This is an interesting question, and I'm going to start it off, but I will probably kick it over to our wonderful label mates on here. But obviously, we're living in an unprecedented time. There's an absence of touring right now, and that's really disrupted specifically. And I would say the space that we're speaking to right now in the folk and roots space. It's kind of disrupted the normal cadence in which artists in the space work. I think there's this traditional release cycle in folk and Americana and roots that they lean heavily on touring, and oftentimes as a result of that, the cadence is album release, tour the album, record another album, release the album, go on tour. And so not that there's anything wrong with that, because it works under normal circumstances, but I think what the last year has allowed for is, there's more time that's been given back to the artists, and as a result, we're starting to see that model shaken up a little bit. We're seeing artists in these spaces release more music, more like their more pop or indie counterparts, which I think is really interesting. We're seeing surprise releases. For example, the Cut and Grass volume series from Sturgill, the Tyler Childress surprise bluegrass album. I think artists are using this time to really not necessarily reinvent the wheel, but show their fans a different side to them. And as a result, we're finding that these surprise releases, they don't necessarily need to be a surprise too, just something that maybe was not expected in this time dropped. And we're seeing that fans are really reacting to that. I think more than ever, going back to what you guys were talking about, social media, this is a time for artists to find new ways to connect with their fans. And it doesn't have to be through just social media platforms. It can be through different types of content. And so I think, surprise releases are just one of them. We're seeing, obviously, we talked about alternative or alternate versions. This is something that's been used in other genres and formats for a long time, but it's just a way to continue to engage with your audience and maintain any momentum that may have, maybe you were feared losing once touring was lost last year. But also, it's not just release strategies. I think, we're seeing new platforms being used like TikTok. I think artists are starting to explore what the possibilities are there. People are taking advantage. I think, Chissy, you mentioned that working with Spotify is not just about promoting content. There's different things that you can, different opportunities you can take advantage of in partnering with us. So live streams obviously are huge right now, and a really easy way to engage with your fans. We did a great campaign with, I believe, Billy Strings recently, a pre-sale for a live stream, as well as some exclusive merchandising. And obviously live streams are really important to him and his fan base. And I think that was a really effective way to partner. So I think, just trying to think of ways, going back to what you said too, knowing where your audience is and finding a way to engage consistently with them. It doesn't have to be all brand new material. I don't think we should expect that artists are having to squeeze every little bit of creativity during this period of time, but there are ways in which you can take advantage of new release strategies to engage with your audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, because Laura just mentioned one of our artists, another thing that we did with one of our artists, Margot Price, we released two things, Perfectly Imperfect at the Ryman. I think that artists are also, because of the time that we're in, finding ways to release music and not being as precious about it as they were before. We're seeing less perfect releases coming out, and it really helps to humanize the artist, and it helps them in other ways too, especially because studio time isn't guaranteed right now. It's not always safe. It's not always something that people can afford because, you know, touring has been canceled, and a lot of artists get the majority of their income from touring. And so one, we released, you know, that live album, and two, another partnership we did with Spotify last year, Margot, called Chicken Winner, or Winner Winner Chicken Dinner. And that was, again, talking about the holistic view of streaming and how one impacts the other. You know, Margot partnered with some restaurants in Nashville to help support them during the pandemic. And basically anyone who ordered the meal got the album. And then we finished the day with a live stream that was presented by Spotify's, one of their flagship playlists, Indigo. And it really helped to make the connection, one, from the physical to the digital. The albums were all supplied by, I think it was Grimey's. They were vinyl releases. And then it drove to the, you know, at the end of the day, you could watch Margot on stage in an empty venue perform some of the songs from her new album. And it really just creates that world of streaming, and that world of consumption and fan engagement that's really necessary. And while that is marketing for the album that she came out with, it's also, you know, a unique way to rethink how you can market an album and rethink how you can release an album and what partners might actually make an impact in this time. It's terrible, but it also, it really does help retool the thinking of it and make some situations a little bit more positive.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that we have covered a lot of ground here. So to me, I want to ask everybody's final thoughts on streaming, you know, just any final thoughts that you have. But for me, I want to say this year has obviously been weird and terrible, but there's so many things that we've had to do to shift strategy or, you know, just be more creative and more flexible that I'm happy about. And I'm glad that we have, you know, not glad that we've been through all that we've been through, but, you know, it's been a nice, you know, push to change things up a little bit. And so I'm hoping that we as an industry can, you know, move forward and keep being creative. And I don't know, I've just loved seeing what everybody's doing. And it's also so interesting, and it feels like it kind of got us out of a little funk. So I think that that's cool. Anybody else have final thoughts to share?
I think I'm on the same page as you, Blair. Like, I think obviously this year has thrown a wrench in everybody's year and everyone's plans. And it's just been really, really incredible to see all the work that the artists have put in to making sure that they are engaging with their fans, that the labels and the artist teams have put in. I mean, it's just, from a DSP perspective, I'm amazed at the creativity and the perseverance. And I can only hope that some of the information we shared today is helpful in terms of making sure that you're using all the resources available to you, and that hopefully some of them are helpful during this really, really strange time.
Anybody else?
Well, I'll just say that I think it's really important that regardless of what's happening in the world, we find ways to support our artists, and we have to stay on our toes. We can't get too comfortable. And the one thing that I can be really grateful for in this era of technology and streaming and the digital landscape is that we have had to become more creative in order to support the artists that are putting their blood, sweat, and tears into what we consume. And I appreciate that. You know, I appreciate what they're doing, but I can also appreciate that the industry is really coming together to support one another.
Agreed. All right. Well, unless anybody has anything else to add, I think we are all wrapped up. Thank you guys for tuning in and listening to all of us. And thank you to all the panelists for participating. I thought this was a very good discussion. I know I learned some stuff. I guess that's it.
Yeah, great job, Blair. Thank you so much. And also to Chissy, Laura, and Tayla for just a great conversation of digging deeper into successful streaming. This session will continue to be available as a recording on the Folk Unlocked platform all week long. Please take a moment to provide feedback about today's conversation by posting comments there in the chat. And finally, Folk Unlocked is made available at a pay-what-you-can price point thanks to the generosity of donors just like you. And if you would like to support our work, donations can be made at folk.org/donate. Thank you so much. Stay safe, stay connected, community, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye, everyone.